How y'all feeling? What you see here, what you experience here, and what you're feeling here is the product of a communal, collective, intergenerational effort, and multi-institutional. Oh, okay, this is a call and response crowd. I can't wait. Hey. So I want to give an extra special thanks to the best planning committee a group of scholars can ask for. I need you all to stand right now so we can give you your flowers. And I need Carrie and Emily to stay standing. Please stand. So Emily has coordinated our reproductive justice futurism mini think tanks across campuses, not only in the 5 colleges, but across the country. And this evening's youth panel. Deep gratitude, Emily. And Carrie. Everyone needs a Carrie on their team. So Carrie coordinated everything. with exquisite precision and execution. So thank you so much, Carrie. BREHA Collective, I need you to stand up, please. So, deep shout out to BREHA Collective members for greeting, hosting, and holding this space with intention. Ash Smith, Megan Gildia, Shika Essegby, Esther Jaguar, and Ayers Warren, and Joy Johnson. Not all could be here, but we give deep thanks for all of their collective effort. Please welcome to the stage our BREHA Collective members. Thank you so much. All right. I just wanted y'all to come up here to say hello. That's it. Thank you so much. You can have a seat. I'm bothering. One of the highlights of my job, if not the highlight, is being able to work with wonderful students like this group here. And what's even special about this is being able to work with them even after they graduate. So thank you for remembering me. Thank you for investing in BREHA mission. And thank you for still doing the meaningful work to create the more just and humane futures, even beyond getting that diploma. Thank you. Over the last 2 days, we have asked some crucial questions. What futures are we imagining? What legacies can we build upon? How will we get there? What opportunities and what challenges are we facing? And like many of our attendees, I have really been thinking with the elders and our contemporaries. I've been thinking with our movement leaders and architects, so I have to pause to big them up as well. Big up to you, Billy Avery. Big up to you, Dazon Diallo-Dixon. Big up to you, Dr. Lori Nasai Jefferson. She didn't expect that, so she's still chewing. Big up to you, Brittany Cooper. Big up to you, Marissa Peasy. And there's so many more in this room. It's an honor to live with, live alongside, build alongside, and research, scholarship, practice, organizing, people who are really invested in this work, not only theorizing, but thinking about how to build it every single day. They are living legends, and we must give them their flowers while they're still alive and well to receive it. So thank you. Adrienne Marie Brown tells us plainly, we are in an imagination battle. Angela Davis reminds us clearly, dangerous limits have been placed on the very possibility of imagining alternatives. These ideological limits have to be contested. We have to begin to think in different ways. Our future is at stake. Ruha Benjamin urges us not only to critique, but to create. We shouldn't shine a light only on the deadly imaginations and social orders that are killing us, but experiment and play with the new prescriptions, visions, and forms of social organization. And she warns us, tune into the hollow ethical commitments of the so-called visionaries. Be attentive to the deceitful machinations of those who fancy themselves the self-appointed stewards of humanity. As each new generation expands their imagination, let them also develop a keener ability to detect bullshit. That's Professor Benjamin's words, not mine. Professor Benjamin said what needed to be said. Each of us can foster the kind of discernment that tells the difference between news stories of collective well-being and false fables deciding our collective fate, end quote. That discernment is not limited to intellectual work. It is political, and we have already known that the personal is political. Ashe? Ashe. Lord told us. Loretta Ross, who had to go home because she had a headache, and we are so glad, her team especially, that she is honoring her body and her wellness. Loretta Ross reminds us, you have to stop imagining that the moment in history is the entire chain of freedom. All you gotta do is make sure that chain doesn't break at your lane. Amen, Ashe. Period. And Robin D.G. Kelley teaches us, without new visions, we don't know what to build, only what to knock down. Making a revolution is not a series of clever maneuvers and tactics, but a process that can and must transform us. What does this mean for us, here and now? It means that we are not only resisting, we are world building. It means not only academic critique and rigorous theorizing. We must also proactively design Black feminist refusals. We prototype solidarities. We map infrastructures that do not require anti-Blackness as precondition, but that build enduring infrastructure of knowledge, of care, and of collaboration. We, as Dr. Robin Adams, raise your hand, Dr. Robin, matter of fact, please stand. We, as Dr. Robin reminded us on the early afternoon panel today, plenary, we should not have to suffer extraordinarily to be ushered into possibility. And I'll repeat that for clarity. We should not have to suffer extraordinarily just to be written into possibility. Over the past 2 days, we have wrestled with assisted reproductive technologies shaped by genetic ideologies and market logics, with Christian nationalism and white supremacy and globalized anti-Blackness, with Silicon Valley's techno-utopian fantasies of engineered futures, with disability erased or instrumentalized, with crisis pregnancy centers operating as surveillance infrastructures, with long-termist philosophies that grant moral weight to hypothetical future people over living communities, with pro-natalist projects, political projects that seek to transform today's economic elites into tomorrow's biological elites, with Malthusian fears repackaged as neutral concern, with the unresolved tensions between reproductive liberty and disability justice, with the reality that healthcare is too often a site of policing and increasingly connected to the deportation regime, and with the persistent question, whose futures are imagined as valuable and whose are rendered disposable? What has become unmistakable over these 2 days is that reproductive futures are not being shaped in neutral terrain. They're being engineered at the intersection of profit, racial hierarchy, ableism, Christian nationalism, and techno-capital power. We have seen how eugenic logics mutate rather than disappear, how innovation can mask exploitation, how crisis can be manufactured to justify control, and how universal language can obscure stratified harm. And so the question before us is not simply what technologies exist, but who governs them, not simply what rights we defend, but what worlds do we build, And not simply how do we resist erasure, but how do we practice interdependence, co-creating worlds we can thrive in right now. Enter Black Feminist Lab Making. It is here, in this fraught terrain of tension, of possibility, and of responsibility, that our Black Feminist Lab Making emerges as method and movement, as knowledge production and community partnership, and as inquiry and infrastructure. Dr. Chelsey Carter and Dr. Nased Falou, please stand up. We must be intentional about how we cite Black women. I didn't ask y'all to see. I'm joking. Dr. Chelsey Carter and Dr. Nased Falou define Black Feminist Lab Making as a framework that centers the way Black feminists pursue and create pathways to do the work of social justice and liberation through our research, our artistry, and our institutional and community engagement. And we know this is no small feat because we understand the collective labor of this and its toll, but also the necessary needs it creates to enable the conditions we need to thrive and transform. It is about building spaces where scholarship and struggle speak to each other, where imagination is fueled by possibility, where those most impacted by reproductive and scientific violence are resourced to design the systems meant to govern our lives, where research is accountable. Enter the Black Feminist Reproductive Justice Equity HIV/AIDS Activism Collective. Enter the Health, Ethnography, and Race Through Sports Hearts Lab founded by Dr. Tracie, Canada. Enter the Lived Experiences Igniting Transformation in Health, the LEITH Lab founded by Dr. Chelsey Carter. Both of which you'll hear from tonight. But I also want to take a moment to uplift the Black Feminist Labs of two other of our RJF attendees doing impactful work. Enter Nased Falou's what Dr. Carter said, gynecologics, which is a Black queer reproductive justice lab for research, multimedia resources, and community engagement. And enter Brittany Cooper's The Race and Gender Equity Rage Lab, a multimodal research incubator committed to pursuing feminist research questions related to the intellectual production and social thriving of Black women and girls. Needless to say, because y'all know, and if you don't know, now you know. Black Feminist Lab Making is where we practice this. In classrooms where students confront their positionality, in digital archives transferred back to community partners, in crossroad collaborations from the United States to Jamaica. What? Yeah. Absolutely. I appreciate the diasporic reckoning. All right. Yes, Colin. Come on. In spaces where we refuse the lie that scholarship and movement work must be separate. It's a lie. I wanted to share two current research projects, quickly, of BREHA's 4 major research buckets. One of them, HIV/AIDS past, present, and future, and the second from our reproductive injustice database, where we're focusing on right now, within that database, the criminalization after Roe's reversal. One area of BREHA's focuses on HIV/AIDS across past, present, and future. In my 2024 course, Black Women's Stories of HIV and RJ, supported by the Amherst's Presidential Serving the Greater Good initiatives, student partnered with the AFIA Center in Texas, what was an organization led by and for Black women living with and impacted with HIV. Together, we engaged community-based participatory research and oral history through the Livable Black Future Storytelling Project. Woo! And we had the pleasure of working with Dr. Robin Adams, thank you, and Dr. Stacy McCormick, and Dr. Amber Reed. So we worked with de-identified oral histories transcripts documenting Black women's experiences with gynecological and obstetric trauma, HIV stigma, and barriers to reproductive health care. Some outcomes included building a digital archive for Black women's HIV oral histories in partnership with the Community Research and Amherst librarians. Shout out to the Amherst librarians. Boom. 2, storytelling projects and public scholarship that circulated both inside and beyond the academy. And 3, transdisciplinary collaborations across Black studies, American studies, and public health, and community-based reproductive organizations. And importantly, this enhanced the research capacity of the AFIA Center when they kind of connected with us, expressed a desire to try to secure grant funding, but needed to display a more robust research profile. These narratives ground our conversations about our current work within the HIV/AIDS bucket on HIV criminalization, which still persists in 32 states despite the modern science demonstrating the effective treatment eliminates transmission risk. In this work, students learn that research is relational. Storytelling becomes not just data, but a pathway to anticipate possible futures through archival and political interventions that inform culturally grounded responses to systemic health inequities. And finally, the reproductive justice database, and where we're working on the criminalization after Roe, shout out to the pregnancy justice, because your important data storytelling work has been incredibly useful for the important terrain of reproductive criminalization that me and my students have been engaging with in the post-Roe landscape in particular. Students analyze pregnancy criminalization, fetal personhood laws, and the growing healthcare to prison pipeline that disproportionately targets Black, Indigenous, poor, and marginalized pregnant people. Across the country, substance use during pregnancy is prosecuted under chemical endangerment laws and mandatory reporting policies, increasingly turning healthcare providers into agents of surveillance. At the same time, white nationalist pronatalist narratives elevate the pure white fetus as a symbol of national survival, while communities of color remain targets of punishment and control. Our research makes clear that these policies are not about protecting life. They're about regulating whose reproduction is valued, whose motherhood is surveilled, and whose bodies are rendered disposable. This work pushes our students to imagine, and alumni, to imagine RJ not only as a rights framework, but as a pathway towards decriminalization, care-centered policy, and humane futures. We are in an imagination battle. But imagination without discernment is dangerous. Don't cover your mouth, it is. Say it with your chest, sis.
I did, but I'm just chewing.
If we are to build futures where Black feminist knowledge is not treated as hindsight but as foresight, then Black feminist lab making offers one way we rehearse the future in the present. Labs like BREHA, the Hearts Lab, the LEITH Lab, the Rage Lab, the Gynecologics Lab, shows us, okay. Shows us how intellectual inquiry can connect to lived experience, into intergenerational exchange, and movement building, expanding reproductive justice futurisms beyond reproduction and beyond the traditional science and technology frame, which is what our speakers is going to tell us a little bit more about. I am so thrilled to introduce y'all. I'm so thrilled to introduce two scholars whose work embody this expansive vision of Black feminist lab making. Tracie Canada is the new Andrew Mellon. Well, not new. She's not new to this. She's true to this. But is the Andrew Mellon Assistant Professor of Cultural Anthropology and the Director of the Hearts Lab at Duke University. She is a Black feminist anthropologist and ethnographer whose research uses sports to theorize race, kinship, care, gender, and performing the body. Canada's book, Tackling the Everyday, Race and Nation in Big Time College Football, which she just celebrated a one-year anniversary for, is an ethnography about the lived experiences of Black college football players. And in addition to her academic publications, her work has been featured in public outlets like Anscape, Essence, Time, and The Guardian. Dr. Chelsey Carter is an assistant professor of public health and anthropology at Yale University. She is a native of St. Louis and a Black feminist anthropologist with research interests in biomedicine, structural inequality, and the determinants of health. She is the founder and director of the LEITH Lab, a hub to address invisibility and misdiagnosis for underserved Black and brown communities at the intersection of genetic and rare diseases, in honor of anthropologist Dr. Leith Mullings. Her first book project, Finding the Forgotten: Race, Bias, and Care in the World of ALS, is an ethnography of the diverse experiences of living with ALS and draws on over 15 years of experience with Black communities affected by ALS. Her scholarship has been supported by private and public generous funders, including the Wenner-Gren Foundation, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Health, and others. Receive, Dr. Carter, receive. Together, their work reminds us that Black feminist labs are not simply research sites. They are infrastructures for imagining and building the futures our communities deserve. Welcome to the stage, Dr. Carter.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Many thanks to the Reproductive Justice Futurisms Planning Committee and National Organizing Committee, especially Professor Professor Loretta Ross. Jallicia got me all in my fifis now. So Professor Loretta Ross, Professor Jallicia Jolly, Ms. Carrie Cuthbert, and Ms. Emile Horn for inviting the LEITH Lab to this beautiful convening. I'm very honored to be here today to represent the LEITH Lab and share about the work we're doing with Black feminist lab making. I am not sure how we got to a reproductive justice space as non-reproductive justice scholars, but I couldn't be more grateful to be in community with each of you during these particular gestures wildly times. As someone that doesn't live too far from here, just about 91, hey Lexi. Just 90 minutes down 91. This is probably the most Black people I've seen in New England. And so for that alone, I'm so grateful to be here. The LEITH Lab stands for Lived Experiences Igniting Transformations in Health, and is a Black feminist laboratory devoted to reshaping biomedical and public health epistemologies about rare neurodegenerative and genetic diseases by centering the lived experiences of Black and Brown communities. Our vision to build this space was centered by a belief that this needed to be a collective hub where people living with rare diseases, caregivers, students, clinicians, researchers, and activists can work together to develop more humanizing, justice-oriented approaches to healthcare and knowledge production. As Dr. Jolly mentioned, our lab is in honor of anthropologist Dr. Leith Mullings. The lab stands in a Black feminist tradition that insists that it's not enough to merely name racism. We must understand it as foundational to the foundational role in the United States and act on what that analysis demands, per Dr. Mullings. Mullings' work, from her critiques of structural racism to her insistence on connecting ethnography to activism, models a rigorous, empirically grounded Black feminist anthropology that bridges theory and organizing, and it is this ethic that anchors our lab's commitments. The lab claims her legacy not as a static homage, but as an active charge to take up her question of what do we do with it and answer through collaborative research, engaged research, and that seeks to materially change the lives of those impacted most by disease, suffering, and inequality. The naming of the lab after Dr. Mullings is itself an intergenerational Black feminist practice. In conversation with her family, who I was actually connected to because of Dr. Donna Ayeen Davis and Dr. Emily Martin, and the decision to invoke LEITH specifically at Yale as the name of my lab was both intentional and a little petty. Yale is the site where Dr. Mullings recounts in her text On Our Own Terms that each year when she would get up to teach her first lecture, she would watch at least 5 to 6 white male students stand up and walk out of her classroom simply because she was a Black woman professor doing her first job. This enacts a form of return and reclamation, bringing her intellectual and political commitments back into a campus that did not always recognize her brilliance and her commitments. This naming links Zora Neale Hurston, Dr. Leith Mullings, and contemporary Black feminist anthropologists in a genealogy of women who carved out space in laboratories and centers on our own terms, out of hostile institutions, treating the world itself as a Black feminist lab, and insisting on spaces where Black women's knowledge, mentoring, and organizing can actually flourish. In this sense, the LEITH Lab is an ancestral and futurist project, lifting while we climb, honoring those who came before by building new and evolving infrastructures for those yet to come. As Dr. Jallicia shared, Black feminist lab making was an idea born out of resistance and persistence with my co-conspirator and dear colleague, Dr. Nasset Falou. Black feminist lab making gives language to what the LEITH Lab is and aspires to be. The endeavor started because we were organizing in a different Black feminist space, and it was not the best. We were looking for opportunities to connect with other like-minded organizers, scholars, and cultural workers to ask questions beyond the scopes of our academic jobs. And so we charted to make our own labs, but we knew that we could not do this alone. Dr. Falou and I argue that Black feminist lab making is both theory and praxis, a framework that interrogates the colonial, patriarchal, and white supremacist roots of the traditional laboratory, while honoring past, present, and future Black feminists who create spaces to do the work across disciplines and across publics. Rather than accepting labs as bounded, positivist spaces, Black feminist lab making treats labs as fluid, relational, and mobile infrastructures, physical, symbolic, and pedagogical containers for collaboration, repair, creativity, and organizing towards Black liberation. The LEITH Lab emerges within this uprising of Black feminist labs, and so many that we model ourselves after, by modeling how a lab can be a site where lived experience, not data points, not data bits, not quant, can actually drive inquiry where community partners are co-theorists, and we're nurturing conflict and self-transformation are understood as necessary conditions for sustaining justice-oriented science amid anti-DEI backlash and institutional precarity. Last spring of 2024, Dr. Falou and I convened 13 scholars at Yale University for a 3-day weekend to think through the question of what is a Black feminist lab. And we've continued to enjoy this space both virtually, and we have a convening again in Toronto to continue asking these questions and work towards a book project. At the LEITH Lab, our vision is fourfold. We are trying to advance anti-racist research equipped to understand and measure and intervene on the impact of racism and related intersections in shaping rare neurodegenerative diseases like ALS or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, if you want to say that 2 times fast, and genetic disease disparities. We hope to foster awareness and advance educational opportunities that center the lived experiences of Black people within the rare disease space. We want to create palliative networks for social and economic support for Black people, families, and caregivers, and also develop a pipeline and network of health equity and rare disease scholars, specifically trained in ethnography and mixed methods and implementation science. I share these kind of 3 big hallmarks. We do too much. But these are my 3 favorite things that we've been working on recently. Our community engaged research work, the Possibilities Grant, which is funded by one of our funders, has been the heart and soul of our lab. When we received our first grant, the institution wanted me, because I am on a soft money job, fun times, wanted me to pad my salary with the entire grant. And I was like, why? You said in my offer letter that I didn't have to do that. So can't this be for programmatic stuff? And so instead, we took $250,000 of that grant and created the Possibilities Fund, which is a mutual aid space where individuals that are living with ALS or caregivers can receive up to $10,000 every month to support any of their needs. Thank you. To support any of their needs. And so it was a repurposing of money directly to the people and for the people. We're also working this little tiny picture in the far top is actually Michael Tyner. And for those of you who know, that is the son of Leith Mullings, who is an incredible producer and director. And he is now the director and producer of our documentary of our lab, Witnessing, which shadows and follows 4 Black families throughout the United States, in Chicago, in Connecticut, in St. Louis, Missouri, and in Arizona, to show the experiences and how systemic bias delays diagnosis and treatment, undermines trust in healthcare, and directly shapes how both lifespan and quality of life for Black ALS patients is able to persist. I'm excited to share that film comes out in about a month. And part of the reason I wanted to have this film was because being in this ALS space for over 15 years, there are literally, in this rare disease, 28 movies focused on white men with ALS. And so when we're thinking about correcting the archive, it has to be more than just what's in the academic ivory tower and behind the paywalls. And so we really wanted to have this documentary be a space when Black people and brown people, because we're also translating our film into Spanish, are able to see themselves and also know that there are no Black and white diseases. A disease like ALS can impact anyone. And finally, collaborations are key to the work that we do. In the final slide that I have, I'll show you the amazing students that work in my lab and do the work that we do. But I also have the amazing privilege to work with these 5 individuals who serve as my community advisory board. And in public health research, I know so many of us in this room are familiar with community engaged research and advisory boards sitting on the research projects that we have. But I was like, well, what if we have an advisory board that actually runs everything that I do and not just the research projects? And so these are paid advisory board members that are both living with ALS, former caregivers of children that have had ALS, and other individuals with rare disease that support the vision of the lab and help us to create our legacies. I cannot take credit for legacies. Quite literally, my students decided to have a play on words of the word legacy, spelled regular, and we decided to call it Leg Us. Because it was really important that they saw themselves and we see Black people and how we're thinking about this work. And so it is a home for media, storytelling, and writings developed by the LEITH Lab in community with people impacted by rare disease to uplift their lived experience and ignite transformations in health. And finally, in addition to some of the cartoons that we've created out of my ethnographic articles like Gaslighting Anti-Blackness, one of the heart and souls of why I am here today is because of collaborations with other scholars in the space. And so I remember back in 2021, I got a random text message one morning that was like, what the hell is going on with this race norming stuff? And I was like, I don't know, I don't watch football, but Tracie does. And so we literally were able to bring our minds together to think through how the afterlives of slavery and how the logics of white supremacy in healthcare created the space for the NFL's race norming practice. And I'm actually really proud to share too, the article that we wrote in Scientific American was one of the first analyses on the piece, before Washington Post, before the New York Times, because of Tracie seeing it and saying, I'm a sports anthropologist, but if I got together with a medical anthropologist, I think we could analyze this a lot better. And I think that the ethos of our work of collaborating to share and trouble and refine ideas across different interdisciplinary fields has been really critical to the work that we do. And lastly, I can't not share that also these intellectual collaborations led to the antibodies special section that recently came out with American Anthropologists that was spawned off of Donna Ayin Davis, who's Davis's amazing work on the theoretical concept of antibodies that she thinks through in reproductive justice, that Jallicia and I then had the opportunity to gather other scholars around to then create a special section with beautiful essays. And so if you have an opportunity, I think until the end of this month, they are free on American Anthropologists for you all to read. Thank you all. These are my wonderful students that helped me do all of the work. If you ever check out our social media, I didn't do a damn thing. That is all of these wonderful people that I would just love to shout out: Ashley, Asia, Avery, Ikra, Jalen, Mami, and Omar. Thank you all so much.
Whew, okay, I'm a little shorter. Okay, there we go. Hi, everybody. How y'all doing? Good. I'm good. I am incredibly inspired to be here. I am perhaps the one who's a bit of an oddball here. But I do have to say that I am always inspired in the company of Dr. Jolly and Dr. Carter. I learn something new every time I talk to these women all the time, all the time. But I am always inspired when I hear about their work. I always learn something new. I always think about ways that I can bring what they're doing in a different way back to my campus. So I'm so grateful to be here, to be with them and to be with y'all. So I had to shout them out. And also to say that I met them at different points in my grad school career, right? I met Dr. Carter later on in grad school. And it was a great meeting and a strange meeting, the way that it came together. But to meet her at the time that I did in grad school and for us to be able to collaborate on the works that we're doing has been incredibly impactful in the ways that I'm thinking about work that I'm doing now, right? Like to be able to engage with the medical anthropologist. I met Dr. Jallicia earlier on in grad school because we were both Mellon Mays fellows. And so the way that, shout out MMUF, to be able to collaborate with people across institutions that I would have never been able to talk to people at just because of where I was geographically located, was incredibly important for me. And the way that our relationships have sustained me, essentially, as an early career scholar has been incredibly important to me, and I can't thank them enough. But I want to bring up the relationships that we have and what they've meant to me because that was something that I realized really early on in grad school, that I was a PhD student in an anthropology department, and I was entering into a field that was going to be challenging on multiple levels. I knew it in grad school. It has proven itself to be true as an early career faculty member. But as a budding anthropologist, I was aware that I was entering into a space where Black folks are always pretty much seen as research subjects, never as knowledge producers. I was going into a discipline where specifically Black women, and we could shout out Zora Hurston, but also there's plenty of Black women who have attempted to enter into this space who have not been able to get their degrees, to get their PhDs, who have been pushed out of their disciplines, who have been hired into other disciplines rather than anthropology, right? So they're not given the credit of being anthropologists, but they have to be hired into other disciplines to even be able to be in the academy. And I was going to be a Black anthropologist who writes with and works about Black people in the US, knowing everything that I knew about the discipline and how it's treated Black people. And so that is something that I had to reckon with the entire time I was in grad school, and also figure out what I was going to do once I became a faculty member, if this is what I was going to choose to do with my career. But I knew I wanted to do something different because of what I was seeing and how problematic I knew that was. Problematic, harmful, hurtful, challenging, all the things, right? So one of the ways that I have attempted to work against all of those dynamics that actually really matter as a Black woman anthropologist, as a Black woman ethnographer, and as a Black feminist in this space was to create a lab around the work that I'm doing. So I am an anthropologist who thinks, there's been little shout outs about it, but I'm an anthropologist who thinks about the way that race, labor, gender, violence, family, care are important analytics in the lives of Black college football players. And it's clear how I came to this, I'm sure. You know, football is a sport that makes a lot of sense for someone of my stature, my physique, the fact that I'm a woman and I actually know nothing about football, which is true, surprisingly. But I'm sure it's super clear. But I read and researched about a group of people who are highly visible in the public imaginary, but whose lived experiences are often completely overshadowed from multiple perspectives, but particularly in academia, but also in sports media, right? Sports media is a space where people will always talk about football players generally. It's usually Black men because they're overrepresented in the sport, but it's always certain narratives that are repeated. And I've been fascinated by the people who are not given these shout outs on ESPN every weekend, because it's a sport that a lot of people play and a lot of people engage with. And there's a lot that's going on there. So that's something that I've been interested in. Across my research, I'm interested in the caring relationships that show up in their lives. As these are the ones who are these are the relationships that are motivating them to keep going, given the exploitative situation that they exist within. And this also inevitably requires an understanding of the plantation logics, of the afterlives of slavery, of the racial capitalism, of the labor exploitation that structure their experiences in the most popular sport in the US. And so as you can imagine, the work and the specific study that I support also often means that I'm in spaces that are only men. I am usually sometimes on panels, especially now that the book has come out, I'm sometimes the only woman that's present that has been asked to speak about sport. And so on a whole different level, like, to be in this room is just really great for me. I feel much more comfortable here. But that's something that I've had to also learn how to reckon with, right? Like, to be a Black woman who's writing about football, who's consistently challenged for what it is that I'm saying, how I'm saying it, why I'm doing it, all of those dynamics are consistently coming up. And so that's how I'm positioning, that's how I position myself, right? Like, that's how I am here. But On top of that, as someone who takes race and sport seriously, I'm realizing that there are multiple publics that are interested in this, right? Like, it's not just an academic thing. It's actually barely an academic thing when you think about all the other people who are interested in it. And there are silos within the academy of the different disciplines that are interested in these topics. But on top of all of that, I am at a school that cares a lot about college sports. I'm coming here from Duke University. I am on, and that matters in lots of ways, actually. I'm a Duke alum, so I saw this up close as an undergraduate. I have now returned back as a Duke faculty member. Currently, I don't know if y'all follow any of this, but currently on our campus, there are tons of students, hundreds of students who are in tents right now, waiting for tickets to the UNC game on Saturday.
Go Heels, baby!
Oh, no. Oh, no. I cannot. Okay, so we can talk. Okay. Close enough. Everybody's blue. Duke UNC, everybody's blue. So saying blue doesn't really help. Yeah, but I appreciate it. That's hilarious. I support everybody black. But that's my point, right? Like, this energy that's in this space right now is my point. And so that's what I'm trying to get at with the work that I'm doing. And so in the fall of, that's hilarious. In fall 2024, I unofficially launched, but also founded, the Health, Ethnography, and Race Through Sports Lab at Duke. Surprisingly, it's one of the only spaces on Duke's campus and UNC's campus, actually, because we have lots of collaborations with UNC. It's one of the only spaces that's like critically and only thinking about the relationships that black athletes have to different sports, but usually specifically football, because that's where my work is. In the lab, which is a Black feminist social science lab that focuses on an intersectional critique of US-based sports, specifically US-based, which is also different for me to be an anthropologist and focus only in the US. I include challenges to structural racism, to white supremacy, to misogynoir, and the ways that black athletes specifically are experiencing all of these across the sports that they participate in. We are motivated by 4 different goals in the lab, but I'll just focus on the first one here. So I'm also at an institution that cares a lot about the STEM fields. And has a huge, thriving med school in different ways in the current moment, but it's still a huge and thriving med school and hospital. So my lab borrows elements from the canonical single PI models that you see in the natural sciences, and also from the multiple PI models that you see in the humanities. And that means that I'm the only faculty member that's there, but I direct a vertically integrated lab with undergrads and grad students focusing primarily on undergraduates. And the way that I have decided to kind of mold this model is I have lots of ideas, but only one person and not that much time. So I have undergraduate researchers who come into the lab and they work on my projects with me, right? So rather than them coming to me with their own work, like their thesis that I need to be the advisor on, or a project that they're working on, an independent study or something like that, I bring in students who are interested in working on my projects and we work on them together, right? And so we have an incredibly collaborative, intergenerational, also interdisciplinary model in the lab, because none of the students that are in the lab are anthropology majors. They are just people who are interested in sport, and they all have to be committed to focusing on the lived experiences of black athletes. If that's where you're starting, then we can work with it, right? I can make it work. But other than that, you just have to be in the space willing to work with me on the projects that I have, and also on the grants that I have written you into, right? Like, I write my students into all of the grants that I have because I also want them to be paid for their labor. And so they are getting paid for the work that they're doing. Sometimes they're getting research credit for the work that they're doing, but they're all working on my projects with me. I appreciate this model because this is countering the way that anthropology often runs. If you know anything about anthropology departments or anthropology projects, it's usually an individual who goes out there and does some work and then comes back and writes a book by themselves. We are not into co-authoring in anthropology. We are not into people like research teams. Like, that's not something that we are often doing. And so to be able to have not just working with other people, but working with students on my work, writing with students, to be an alum and to talk to current Duke students is also just an interesting experience to hear about the differences across our experiences. So to be able to just talk to students and see what's going on with them and how they can bring some of that into the lab space. Because I mean, I will give a shout out. UNC a couple days ago wrote a story about one of the students that's in the lab because he's a Robertson Scholar, which means that he goes to UNC and Duke. It's a very particular, oh, you know about it. It's a very particular scholarship. But to have a student like that who's very clearly interested in the rivalry between the two universities, who's very clearly interested in the sports on both campuses, to be in the lab and thinking through some of the dynamics, I think is really interesting. And to be able to get someone like that is like really exciting for me. So because of how this is set up, this means that the students are like, they're working on IRBs, they are going to the archives, they're writing lit reviews, they're analyzing interviews that I'm conducting, but they're analyzing the interviews. They're going to conferences and presenting there themselves. And this is all while we're all collaborating in the lab together. So we are all working on this stuff together at the same time. They're coming up with their own ideas, but again, this is all under the umbrella of what it is that I am doing. Currently, we have 4 projects that are running in the lab, and usually it's headed by a different student. Each one is headed by a different student. I will probably, well, whatever, they're not here. My favorite is don't tell them, but my favorite is the Integrating Tobacco Road football project because I'm from North Carolina, and so I've always been really interested in the football players who integrated the historically white institutions in North Carolina versus going to the HBCUs that dot the state, right? Like there's a ton of HBCUs in North Carolina. So why in the 60s did you decide to go to Duke over NC Central? Why would you go to Wake Forest instead of NCANT? And of course, because of the age of these projects, like all of these people are still alive, right? And so we are conducting oral histories with the Black football players who integrated the teams across these institutions because I'm really interested in the geographic, like how the geography of the state impacted integration across the state. So I'm also thinking historically here, right? Like it's across time and space, different methods, but they're all qualitative methods. And currently also the Concussions in High School Football project is the one that will be my second book, but we've got students that are working on different parts of that, right? Like, so they're thinking through different dynamics, and then eventually this will be like a much larger longitudinal ethnographic project that will be that will become my book, but there will be smaller projects that they're working on with me. Here are just a few of our outcomes. For a while, I have been writing in public outlets. With the book coming out, I also have like a decent public presence across podcasts and different events. And so that's something that I wanted to keep up in the lab and integrate students into. We are incredibly committed to having events on campus, so bringing people to campus, and so that's what a couple of these pictures are. Every year, I take the students to a conference, and so they have to learn how to present at a conference and be in front of people, right? We work on the papers, but they are the ones who have to present them. And right here at the bottom, I want to highlight American Quarterly, which is going to be the first publication that comes out of the lab. So I wrote an article with one of the students that's in the lab about the lab, but also about the project that she was working on. And so I imagine this as a space, and it's a specific place in American Quarterly. It's not just a journal article. They have now a different method in American Quarterly that is about turning research into practice. And so I am incredibly interested in these types of spaces, right? Like this is more of an essay that is accessible, that we will of course freely give to anybody who wants it, right? Like, so I want the people who are included in the work to be able to access it, to be able to understand what we're writing about them, and to be able to see it before too, right? I think that it's really important to think through all of the people who are involved in this, because I am the only person that's running the lab, but I'm not doing it alone, right? Like, and so I think that that's really important to highlight. And again, I will show the students that I'm working with too. But in my lab, like we focus on public-facing work and public events on campus and integrating other universities in our area just because of what it is that we talk about. And that's the way that our model works, right? But it's been great to be able to be in community with other Black feminists at other universities who have similar lab models, but they're doing it in different ways. They have different outcomes, they have different outputs, they have different research foci, whatever, like different research focuses, which is not the plural, of what they're doing, right? Because then we are all in community together. We're able to talk across our work. We're able to collaborate and see what's going on. We can write across, right? Like now we have spaces where we can get together and write something as the PIs of our labs or get our students together so that they can meet each other. There's so much possibility, I think, in this model, and is really exciting for the unfortunate moment that we're in, and in the hopes of moving to something else. And that's what I'll say there. I will close here by acknowledging the people that are in my lab. Mariah did graduate last year, but I don't know, we still hear from her sometimes. But we've got, again, like I have mostly undergrads that are in my lab, and Federico is a PhD student in the anthropology department who does help this run, right? Like, so we are incredibly vertically integrated to have somebody at each level, and the way that we're all working together. I have been funded by some, which is like fantastic, that there are agencies, funding agencies that are seeing the importance of humanities, interpretive social science work, that are willing to give money to a lab like mine that is very qualitative, that is focusing on sport. I do talk about gender, but it's men, so maybe that's why they're, not too mad at me yet. But also I do write about race, right? And so like the way that I am hopefully encouraging the students that are in my lab to think critically about race while they're in school, to then take that out into the world and not be horrible human beings, is really all I'm trying to do, right? And if they can do that through something that they're already interested in, which they clearly are because they're sleeping outside to go to a basketball game, then I think that like my work here is kind of done. So I want to close by just saying that I appreciate the creativity and the collaboration allowed by the lab model. I appreciate that I am not doing this by myself, right? Like, and I very rarely do anything by myself. And I see this as a really productive, incredibly productive space to put scholarship into practice, across a variety of spaces in whatever way we want to do it, right? Like, this is what's so exciting about this, because we can do whatever we want to and we have the flexibility to do it. It's the lab space, and specifically, I mean, I will say specifically mine, but the lab space I think is a space of possibility that can turn critique into praxis, alongside some really engaged and really exciting undergraduate and graduate students. And that's part of what I see my job as being as a faculty member on a campus like Duke's, right? Is to engage students in something that they might not have had exposure to before, and also focusing on certain students who might not have had exposure to those things too. In my mind, there are endless possibilities for these types of models. So hopefully there's some other people in here who are maybe inspired by the lab model, and can get on board with us, because this shouldn't be left just to the scientists. And I think that there's something very specific that we have to say as humanists, as social scientists, about what's going on now. I think that there's something that we can add to these conversations across these different spaces, whether it's sports or different medical institutions or reproductive justice, right? Like, we have something to say. We are here, we've been here, and we're not going anywhere. So thank you.
Give it up to Dr. Carter and Dr. Canada.